The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards the
most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on The Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts.
Kia ora tātou. My name is Toby Manhire. I'm the editor of The Spin-off, and huge welcome to everybody here tonight. This is the number 3 in the Politics and Pub series that we've been running with Verb Wellington. And the first one was in level 4, I think, and it was Danyl and Andrew and Neil in a closet somewhere. And the second one was here at the magnificent Meow, but very separated. And here we are now in level 1. If we keep going, we can push all the way through level 0 and come out the other side for the next event, I think. Huge thank you to Meow for having us here. They're a magnificent kind of pillar of the arts community in Wellington. So go and order a drink, order another drink, get a bowl of milk for your baby yak, whatever you need. This event is a collaboration between Spin-off members, thanks to the Spin-off members here, and the Verb Wellington community members. I think that's what it's called. Magnificent. Join them too. I think that's kind of all the housekeeping I have to do. Just want to welcome Danyl Mclauchlan and the third to last and next leader of the National Party, Simon Bridges. A very big, warm welcome.
Thank you, Toby. Evening, everyone. I think we're just gonna jump right into this. I've got my prepared questions here. I work up at Victoria University, and I brainstormed with my colleagues. And what would you ask Simon Bridges? Because I thought I will turn the intellectual firepower of my university on this National Party politician. And all of their questions were about the yak. So if you don't know, Simon, a couple of weeks ago, maybe months ago, I don't know, it seems like a long time, did a piece on social media in which he appears in a paddock with a baby yak and gumboots and a Roxy Music t-shirt. Maybe he's wearing shorts or trackies, maybe he's not, who's to say. And everyone wanted, it went viral, and so they just want to know, what was the yak's name, and is it a boy yak or a girl yak or a non-binary yak? What can you tell us about the yak?
I think non-binary. Well, firstly, I want to say it's great to be here. Andrew over there somewhere said to me when I was just about to come up here, good luck. And I said, look, I've killed my career several times. It can't go that badly, right? Who knew about the yaks? I mean, basically, we were at my sister Rebecca's place in Nelson, Tasman, and they've got a sort of a big farm, and her husband is a big animal vet. And he has these weird and wonderful ideas of somehow cloning or doing something and making a lot of money out of the yak. So we were out there with the baby yak, Hope, I think was her name, and we're walking along.
A yak called Hope.
Yeah, this is exactly right. So and then it's metaphorical something, I think. So and Natalie, who's here tonight as well, actually, and she's almost never here, but here tonight with us. She, I don't actually, I feel like it was non-consensual videoing because I didn't actually necessarily know it was happening. But, and I suppose that was part of the, if I can say so, the magic of it. But who knew? Who knew that would happen? I think it's just time and place and context.
So your family has a financial interest in yaks. So you are kind of in the pocket of baby yak.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be a scandal one day.
The real scandal of this election because we haven't had
or
enough
a Vita yak or something. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, that was not intended. No, don't use that. That's cut that. Judith
page,
is great.
The front page of the Dominion writes itself, doesn't
exactly,
it? Yeah,
exactly.
So I kind of wanted to try and segue that into like a vaguely credible question about leadership, because something that struck me about your kind of like, I don't know, your social media virality when you stopped being leader is how kind of different it was from the way you often came across in the media when you were leader.
Yeah.
And I just think that's quite interesting because you would have had a lot of expertise around you when you were the leader, telling you what to say and how to connect to the public and how to make the public like you. And it didn't really, like there's no nice way to say this, it didn't really work. But then as soon as that wasn't there, it did. And it seemed kind of, because I when you first became leader, I had friends in the National Party saying, Simon's got a lot of character, he's going to connect with the public. And it didn't happen, but then it did when it wasn't kind of like that useful anymore. So what happened? What is
now I'm like the C grade sort of act at the side of it. No, I mean, firstly, I did have amazing help, but the fuck ups were all my own, right? So they're not that hard to orchestrate. I think the reality is, as we've seen, and over the last wee while, there's the being in leadership and being in opposition leadership is hard, and there's just no doubt a weight comes on you, and the problems, again, as we've seen recently, sometimes just come several in a day, and you got to make those decisions, and so you kind of don't have time to smell the flowers or the yaks or do any of that stuff. And you've got people doing social media and all these things. But the reality is, I suppose as the yaks do show, you've got to be in a time and a place where you're relaxed and you want to do it.
Yeah.
And when you're leading an opposition up against, a first term government with Jacinda Ardern at the top, that's really hard. And you just got to kind of, who knows? I mean, I think an interesting question is to your point about trying to get some depth and seriousness into this is, would the yaks have worked when I was opposition leader? And I think, in a sense, probably the answer is no. But there you go.
So yaks aren't the solution to every problem in life.
Evidently, is the best cappuccino milk you will ever get.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So something that I noticed when I was, talking to some of my colleagues is that they didn't understand. Well, let me put it this way. The complaint they had about you was that you kept criticizing the government, and they didn't quite understand that that is literally the role of the opposition leader. And sort of that we have an adversarial system. I think that's something that's not as well understood. Do you think that's understood? Like why
I think it probably is in a head way, in a head knowledge that's the role of the opposition. I think what I'm after a sort of sympathy vote here tonight, right? I think what perhaps isn't as well understood as maybe a more subtle but just as important point if you're in opposition against a first-term government, like I say, with Jacinda at the helm of it, and that is that you have to get on the news, right? So the worst thing than being hated is being irrelevant, right? And there is no option if you're the leader of a big political party. Your people, in our case, 55 MPs. There was 56, but we don't need to get into that tonight.
We're going to move on to that later.
I think it's like 53 now, but let's not get into that either. They expect you to perform, and nothing critical of that. And the reality is, when it's Jessica Mutch and Tova O'Brien and RNZ and all the others there, they are not going to put me on the news if I say, you know what, actually that's good. They've done a really good job on that. By the way, in my defence, one time in 27, we would do that, and it's just not news. And so the only way to get on the news and to be relevant, and in truth, to keep the party vote sort of numbers up when there's going to be a TV poll, is to negative is one word, I would say, construct some sort of critical scrutiny of the government.
So one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of, being relevant in the media is that I kind of wondered if you were a little bit similar to David Shearer, because he also had the problem in that he was trying to do that, trying to be relevant in the media, but he also just had a faction in his caucus kind of briefing against him constantly. And it put a boundary, like a really tight boundary on what he could say. And it really closed the window of what kind of stories and issues he could be relevant on. Is that kind of something that you experience as well? Did you
look a little? I know what you're saying. I mean, I think with Shearer, in fact, my personal view is when you look back over the 9 years of Labour in opposition, he was possibly in some respects the best opposition leader, right? In a funny sort of way, I think he was the most, I hate this word, but it's the word of our time, authentic. He was middle of the road. He actually in some ways is very strong. I think where he suffered, and we've seen this in our party, dare I say it, in recent times, is that he had too many people around him telling him what to do, giving him advice, saying, you've got to do this, no, you've got to do it that way, no, actually this third way is the best way. And the problem with that is, if you do that, you end up kind of stuffing up everything. That
you can no longer fake your authenticity.
Something like that, you can sort of put a shrink in and tell me what that all means. But, I think that wasn't my problem. I actually think in many respects behind the scenes, and of course no one here, maybe with the exception of Natalie, saw behind the scenes, but behind the scenes, one fault, myself and the people around me didn't have is actually we did make decisions. And in a sense, although it wasn't sort of necessarily worth anything, that's why I got through 2.5 years of the gig, because we would hear from different people, but then actually we did make decisions. And I think in leadership and in politics, making a decision, dare I say it, sometimes even the wrong one, is much better than what I think David suffered from. I think David's a top guy, but was sometimes not knowing where to go on something.
So your replacement, Todd Muller, was also not kind of legendarily decisive. And I'm curious when you were watching that, the moment that kind of I don't know, interregnum or whatever you want to call it, that period, my mind always goes to that amazing footage that the News Hub team shot when they announced their, their lineup, and there were no Māori in it, and Nikki Kay said that Paul Goldsmith was a member of Ngāti Porou, and it was just excruciating.
That was my favourite one as well.
Yeah, so I
like that.
I just wanted to know, what was it like, kind of knowing that you'd been replaced by these people who I assume sort of thought politicians are a very confident species, and they would have gone in with this attitude. And I talked to some of the people who are involved in that, of kind of the grown-ups are here now, and we're going to do what Simon Bridges should have been doing all this time. And you guys are going to finally see some real opposition in politics. And it was so terrible. And so what was it like kind of watching that and thinking, this is what I've been replaced for?
Quietly satisfying.
Right.
No. No, that's not true. No, that's not true. I mean, in all seriousness, I think that only if I'm being straight up. I didn't like it. In truth, it's the old cliche, but the worst day in government's better than a million days in opposition. That's true, right? I want to be in government, and that's why I'm staying in politics. I feel like it's a contribution to make in that. The only very quiet, small, little slither of satisfaction I got was just for others to know, indeed my friends and colleagues, you know what, it's not as easy as it looks, even when it's going badly, right? It's a hard gig, and actually, I'm sure Todd and Nikki and others around them would agree with that today. I reckon, it's always easy to say what people got wrong, and I'm about to do that. But I think what they show, which is why I still think National does have a path to power, even that we're seriously an underdog and all of those things, is that they suffered from things Judith won't suffer from. And one of those was they wanted to be, in the leadership team, they're a very small target. We're going to know, actually, if Jacinda said something, we're going to agree with that. And you're right. I think that was because they looked at what I did and they said, well, we're always disagreeing, and that's no good. So they took a different tact. That the problem with that is that never works. And as you saw, National's popularity declined, because there are a lot of people who say, you know what, actually they are getting this thing about COVID-19 wrong, or, in the economy there are these things that could be done better. And I think it also demonstrated another thing I've already said to you, really, but that is that politics today, and you can argue whether this is good or bad, but it's high energy, and you have a sort of a duty, if you're the opposition leader, to be getting on TV and doing that and having some energy about that. And that was something that they, I think, struggled with for a few weeks as well.
Russell Norman described it to me as you're a leader of an opposition party. You want to look like a duck, and that you're sort of like gliding along, but under the water, the feet are paddling furiously. Yeah. So
I think that's right. I think the only other, we're really on a roll here.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'd sort of say is, what is also true, and what, and I reflect on, if I could change one thing, is when you think about that aspect, because I think you're right that there is a actually solemn, almost noble, not everyone will agree, but aspect to, it's our system. Opposing to sort of refine the system and get the best stuff right, and it makes a good government better. By the way, if you're doing that, what we lacked, I think, a bit in National at the time is what Key had, what English had, which people like Stephen Joyce around them to take it to the opposition, right. And have those things. In my case, it was often a case of, look, I had to perform that role as well, if you like, leader and attack dog, and that, of course, doesn't go so well for public for personal polls. It did, I think, though. Here I am. I sound like some old politician defending his record, because I am, but it did keep the party support very high.
So I want to kind of pull back and talk about politics in a more general way, because we've had this amazing period in which we're going through this national crisis, and there's a global pandemic, and there's an economic crisis, and it's kind of been married with this amazing level of dysfunction at the kind of political class. We have the Serious Fraud Office investigating these 3 different donations and 3 different parties, and there have been all these resignations and scandals. So what is going on?
Yeah, no. Well, there's so much in what you're asking. I think on COVID, there's just this natural human thing that smarter people than me, are probably in the, I don't know, is it the anthropology or the psychology department of Victoria, can kind of work through. And that is that countries rally in times of crises. And that's probably actually a good instinct, right? And now that I'm not the leader, I can say, I can be a bit sort of relaxed about that, because actually, I get that. And as I say, it's a good instinct. Alongside that, the SFO stuff, well, that's one thing, and that's inexcusable. I mean, it's criminal, right, actually. And we'll see whether it is when these things go through the court cases. All the wider shenanigans, though, I'm not making excuses for it. The sexual picadillos and the various things. I would just say, actually, you out there in the audience, you're no better than us. And if you were to come to Parliament with your, no, that's true, but it's a House of Representatives, right? We don't go there as saints. We don't. I'm sorry. And all I'm saying to you is, I think if you got 120 people from any random centre in New Zealand and you put them in Parliament in those circumstances and those conditions, you'd actually see that the majority would perform well and would keep with their ideals and so on. But you would find that a minority aren't in that case, and there are the shenanigans and so on, which I'm not saying is acceptable, but which happen. And I think we want to do all we can to try and make sure actually the culture that one of my colleagues who gave a valedictory tonight spoke about. You spoke very powerfully, Sarah Dowie, about being, quote, a scarlet woman and the effect of that. And actually the media's culpability in some of that. We've got to keep thinking about ways to make things better. But I do think, most MPs are working hard, do keep their ideals, and are trying to do their best most days. And that's true in all parties.
So is it the stress of because I kind of think politicians are quite unusual. Like I've worked in academia and IT and finance, and these are all industries where people like behave badly. But my impression is that MPs are just like quite a lot worse. and I think there are like, and one of the things I think goes on is you guys, because a lot of the kind of like bad behavior is directed at staff, and you have these events-based contracts, so you can just kind of fire anyone really at any time, which like creates all these problems. But also, like, there's no other job I think that is quite as stressful in such a public way. Like, I can't really think of anything else where you can kind of get publicly humiliated on such a regular basis.
Yeah. I think on MPs, look, of course, if you look at it right now, if you were sitting out there, and I have always said this to new candidates who think about it, if you're rational and you've got a kind of an okay job and you've got a partner, maybe you've got kids, maybe you're thinking about having kids, and you're thinking it through, you won't go to Parliament, right? That's just the reality of it. And actually, I often say to people, you know, only decide that you really want to do this if you just can't shake it, right? And so, yep, you're right. It's a certain kind of person. I would say high ideals. You might say psychopath. I don't know, but certainly a Class A, Type A type people who, you know, are comfortable with high octane and all of those sort of things. What worries me though is that right now, with the, you know, remarkable, terrible behaviour you've seen in recent times, the Andrew Falloon stuff is, you know, the most epicent example. Is what that does is that makes that irrational decision to come to Parliament like even more irrational. And by the way, that's not good for any of us, because by the way, we do spend billions and billions of your dollars. We are the people who decide what environmental checks and balances and safeguards are in place for New Zealand. We do decide the decisions that determine whether the health system is going right or not. So, you know, we've all kind of got a vested interest in making sure that the system is reforming, getting better, but also forgiving at some level for normal people, the representatives that we want to go to Parliament.
So you talked about Sarah Dowie kind of in her speech. I haven't seen it yet. She just gave it, kind of like putting the media on trial a little bit. And so that's something that I think, I don't know, I don't want to kind of like defend everything that's in the media, but there's often a critique that the media kind of amplifies scandal and personality-based things at the cost of like serious political substantive discussion. And I don't know, I think there are a few journalists out there and who've had a similar kind of experience to me, which is that when you kind of write about policy, not many people really read it.
Yep.
Like, you know, I wrote this massive piece on like National's, you know, and social investment thing for the 2017 election. And I think it had like 20 readers. Whereas if you write about, you know, I don't know, like Jacinda's dream holiday or something, then you're kind of like guaranteed that's going to have a massive readership. Yeah. And so there is that constraint on what you can write. As you know, there is just that constraint on what you can realistically cover. And most journalists do cover both. It's just, of course, one gets amplified.
And of course, you're also right. Yeah. It's an easy claim to make, right? Yeah. Look, let's blame the media. They're the bad guys and girls in this, and then they're getting it wrong. And
there's a
so
saying,
it's not us, it's them, right?
There's a saying, who said this, that a politician who complains about the media is like a sailor who complains about the sea. Yeah. There's a British politician.
And we need each other, you know, the same way the sailor needs the sea. I would just say that
I feel like we have a beautiful poem going here involving like yaks and ducks.
There was a young man from I would just say that there are some new things, though, right, that are going on in the media. And I'm in dangerous territory because I know there's, you know, as you say, journalists in this room who live it, breathe it. But I think what we can agree on is that the media is more stressed today than it's ever been. There's lots of money problems around that. So that does just increase that tendency for, you know, as we all call it, the clickbait stuff. And those tendencies are all moving one way, and that is a bit of a worry. And you know, what a suck up I am, but I mean this truly. I am glad and grateful that there are the likes of the Spin-Off and Newsroom actually, and a bunch of other ones who are doing some longer form stuff, who are trying out new models, because we need that.
So, well, thank you. Thank you on behalf of the Spin-Off and its members. So the other thing I sometimes think about this debate, the sort of like policy versus personality debate, is that most of the people that decide elections are swing voters, and they're not like super informed about politics. And I kind of think it's okay for them to make sort of judgments based on character rather than policy, because they don't really, like, unless you're just really quite informed, you can't make coherent decisions about whether, like the Kiwi Build policy, if you'd made a decision in the last election based on the Kiwi Build policy, and probably quite a lot of people did, that was just quite a bad decision that you made, because that, like, they didn't implement it and realistically couldn't. So, but, you know, like, is this person going to be a good leader during a global pandemic? Are they going to just make good judgments and stop us all from being killed? Is like a reasonably good basis for, yeah, okay.
That's totally right. I mean, look, there's no doubt character and, you know, the whatever you want to call it, but that overall performance and your sense of a leader really matters, right? So there's no doubt about that. And actually the characters around them, you know, whether their team is good and what you make of it, all of that matters. There's just no doubt about it. Policy also matters, though. And I certainly, to the extent you're saying this, wouldn't agree with you that actually Kiwis from university professors down to, you know, whoever, don't respond to it. They actually do, and I can tell you from my own experience over 2-something years as leader of the opposition, we were at our best and our strongest, and the polls on TV and so on showed it when we cut the crap and we were just out there with big, bold, sometimes, and probably I suspect in this room, policies that many here wouldn't agree with, but edgy policies that people could see, they could feel, they could make an assessment on, not cerebral stuff necessarily. We are in the age, rightly or wrongly, I was going to get him in once in this session, Donald Trump. You know, we are in that age where actually the big, blunt stuff works. And by the way, all parties in New Zealand play that game at a level. So you do have to sometimes simplify that stuff down to kind of, you know, will that median voter kind of get it? But I reckon they do respond to policy.
Lynn of Mount Roskill is that
Lynn of Mount Roskill?
Is that who they talk about in the
Jim of Tawa? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you think in terms of policy and issues? What is this election about?
Well, firstly, I despair, and my single biggest rant that I'll try and keep brief, but is that what I don't like at the moment, and in fairness today, Judith and those around her have come out with some stuff that is real, genuine policy, but what I despair about and what I don't want to see is a policy-free election. I don't want to see one where you don't have a contest of ideas. And that was what, under Todd Muller's leadership, I worried about, was that we would have a situation where, as I say, it was Labour light. Effectively, it was hugging the Labour Party's positions on a bunch of things. I want voters to have a real choice where there's some shade between the two positions. What is this election about? Well, I can only give you my very partisan view as a National Party politician who's still proud to be a National Party politician and thinks we still have a real shot at winning this election. And that's this. I don't think it's actually so much about COVID anymore. I think we're smart, and, you know, I didn't get this at all right when I was leader of the opposition, to leave that alone at a level, to bank where we are as a country, and to be focused on the future of New Zealand in the next 3 years, because the next 3 years set the tone for the 2020s. So that's a thought shift I don't think New Zealand has made right yet. Not the past, where we're going. And then that's very much, surprise, it won't surprise you, but economic, about jobs, tax, debt. I also think in vast swathes of provincial New Zealand, there's worries about crime and law and order. I also think, you know, there'll always be big concerns about our our public services, health and education. So that to me is sort of where it's at. And I think that the party that right about now, I think we are flicking into this, the party that can shape that up in the best way and convince voters that they've got the future and that they know what to do about that future for you, your kids, your grandkids, they'll be the party that gets the biggest party vote on and into September 19th.
Are there any available voters in the audience? I'm just curious about that to see what Simon's playing for here. Can anyone raise their hand if they're kind of a swing voter there? So we've got one. Okay, so...
You are the only guy I'm talking to all night. And I just want to say I'm growing my hair just like you. That is a really nice shirt. And neither you nor I need to work out at all. Okay. Just lost that one. There is literally no one. I'm just playing for Natalie's vote
Simon
right
and
now.
Bridges charm, ladies and gentlemen. So you're Foreign Affairs spokesperson. Yeah. Why did you pick the Foreign Affairs portfolio during a time in which no one can leave the country?
Yeah. Zero work with that.
Right, okay, yeah.
No. So, I suppose I just thought that we are, and you can always say this, right? So you say, well, you could have said that 5 years ago. I think it is especially true right now. I reckon we are at a particularly crazy, just like you were saying around domestic politics, crazy, uncertain, look, without being alarmist, dangerous time, actually. Whether it's COVID, whether it's the climate, whether it's... I think right at this moment, the biggest one of all, the US-China, whatever you want to call it, but stoush, that is just getting worse by the day. We've got some big problems. And so if we were in a sort of a situation where I thought with foreign affairs, there wasn't going to be a lot of action there, it was kind of just be nicey and, cucumber sandwiches with the French ambassador and all these sort of things. That wouldn't be my gig. But I do think there's more to it right now. I think it calls for a really bold...
Yak diplomacy.
Yeah, yakety yak, It calls for us standing up for our interests and our values. And, actually, let's get him in once in this conversation as well. Winston Peters has got 99 million things wrong. Actually, he's getting the stuff around Hong Kong basically very right at the moment. So there's a bouquet for him.
Okay. So you're voting for Winston Peters now. You've been persuaded. So that one of the things that I've kind of been asking people about in this series is political change and how do people who aren't part of the political system affect change? Like how do civilians kind of make a difference and change things? But I also kind of thought that you might have a slightly different take in this, which is how invested should non-politicians be in politics? Like how much of our lives should we kind of, be preoccupied about with politics? Is it something we should pay attention to once every 3 years? Is it something we should just read about on social media 16 hours a day?
Yeah, I suppose I am old-fashioned as much as I think you should be invested, right? Yeah. And I think you have a sort of a basic civic obligation. By the way, you all by being here kind of show that you're probably in the 0.03% of people who kind of actually have turned up for something and do give a damn or are interested in these these things. So I think you do have an obligation. I mean, here's maybe the preachy bit. And I always learned as a jury trial, the best way to win an argument is not that I ever applied this well in politics, but as the kind of the smallest, lowest hanging fruit kind of argument, the least in your face. But I would just say to you, right, actually, you guys and girls and people, that was being sort of inclusive there on all of that. You have I reckon, a bit of an obligation to be involved at some level. I think what people will say these days as well, they get involved in a moment, in a movement, whether it's Black Lives Matter or it's whatever it is, and that's fantastic. But what worries me, and actually in a funny sort of way, I haven't worked this out in my head, but you were talking about the SFO before. That's kind of part of this thing, is that not enough ordinary, good, decent people are getting involved in the political process and political parties, right? And that's a crying shame. I've got here, I'm such a hero, a plaster on my thumb from doing signs all weekend, right? I really fucked that thumb up, actually. And I'm a bit worried about it. And you know what? So there are really non-glamorous aspects of practical everyday politics in New Zealand. And I'm sort of suggesting I don't really care. Well, I do, but I'm trying to be noble here. Whether you're Green, Labour, National, what you are, I actually think more should be involved in the political process. Because, by the way, here's a deep and meaningful, honest bit about that. That's part of why actually parties scramble for money. Because, by the way, we need money. And a lot of people will say, well, the answer to that is let's just state fund them, make it easy. I certainly say no, actually, because I think from an overall standpoint on this, you want political parties that have communities supporting them in tangible ways because they believe in them. I think it's freedom of expression to be able to hand money over to a political party and the like. But the problem is bluntly, if ordinary, everyday, decent Kiwis aren't doing it, we have to go hunting for it. And that's what you're seeing with that SFO stuff at a level.
I think Bryce Edwards figured out that you guys, parliamentary parties, get about $100 million a year in funding. So it kind of seems like we have this dual system in which we sort of have massive state funding, but also donations as well.
And that, to be clear, that funding you're talking about, of course, goes to members of parliament to perform their, I suppose, non-political roles. And that's good. I suppose you could make a case for moving that over into the political side. Personally, I'm not convinced.
And I also I kind of be curious about your take on this, and I haven't quite formulated this in my head, so I'm trying to do it on the fly. I kind of feel like quite a lot of the billboards are a good example. No, billboards don't persuade someone to vote for a political party, but you kind of have to put them up because your opponents are putting them up. And so a huge amount of, and you have to have a huge social media team because your opponents have a social media team. And so it's a kind of a Red Queen's dream scenario from Alice in Wonderland when everyone's kind of running to stay in place. And so you have to solicit donations from, the fishing industry or whoever it is, or the Chinese Communist Party, to be able to fund the stuff that doesn't make a difference.
Hey, you should leave Phil Goff and Leanne Dalziel out of this, okay? That's really hard, what you just did.
Yeah, so you're kind of soliciting this money.
Edit that one too, that's not good. Allegedly.
In a way that corrupts the political system, but it doesn't change any of the outcomes because everyone's kind of doing it.
Yeah. I've just got caught up on that Phil Goff stuff, so I forgot everything you said. But, no.
It was very persuasive.
It's come back to me. It's come back. I hear you, but I would make another argument. And I say this as an incumbent, okay? So I have got a reasonably safe seat in Tauranga. And, the truth is, if you want to be blunt about it, the same with, Jacinda Ardern, Grant Robertson, Jerry Brownlee. We have massive advantages because, by the way, we're on TV all the time. We even the bad stuff is good in one way when you're a local MP because it's just name recognition. And what political geeks will tell you is what really matters is name recognition. So even if you hate me, if you go into that box in Matua Tauranga and I'm the only name you know, you know what? You may just vote for me. That's sort of so. Here's my deep and meaningful point on the fly around all of this. If you don't have some of those other things, like the freedom to get signs up, the freedom to do all that kind of campaigning that you're saying is like a negative compliance cost and so on, actually, you know who that benefits? Me. And I feel really strongly, and I know this from personal experience, when I beat Winston Peters' ass in 2008 in Tauranga, I know that even the grannies who voted for me at the selection battle didn't think I would win, right? So people rewrite history. They think, oh, look, it was easy. He was going to win, and it was a turn to national and so on. No, I was unknown. I was young. He was the foreign minister, and his name recognition was out of control. But the reality is we outworked him, we outsigned him, we did all of those things from volunteers. It wasn't big money or anything, and we had the ability to beat him. And I want, not in Tauranga, but everywhere else, in Mount Albert and Wellington Central, the ability for unknown candidates to come along and to do that again. And so I suppose I'm making the case for you, probably not particularly well, but for the nobility of signs that say nothing and pamphlets in your letterbox and all of those things. That's grassroots democracy that can get rid of powerful incumbents.
So thank you for that. I think we'll go open to questions from the audience now. I'm really just the warm-up act, and the tough questions usually comes from you guys. So do we have a microphone to pass around? We've got microphones, so stick your hands up and have at it. Any questions?
Hi, Simon. I've got a question, and I just would over here next to your wife, actually. Quick question: what did you write in Paula Bennett's leaving card?
Well, I haven't signed one, is the honest truth, so that's but I can make something up. I tell you what, and by the way, you're very special because I was going to be at that, and I got rid of her to come to this. So there you go. What I would have said is two things that are, as part of a team, right? If you think about the teams you work in are so important. And one was just she brought massive fun, and that's not just a shtick. That's her genuine personality. She was always, I know it's hard for you to believe, but I'm a serious dry balls. And, I'm just trying to get through the work, and I just want the outcome from the meeting. She would do dumb stuff, pranks, all these things. So she was and is serious fun, and I needed that, and I valued that. I think the second thing, let's be a little bit sexist and honest about it all. All around me were pale, stale males. And what she did that they never did in those meetings I told you about where we had to make decisions and so on, they'd be offering critiques and trying to say the right thing and the clever thing. She got on and fucking did stuff, right? When I needed someone to organise the National Party conference because we were in a hole and no one liked me, and I needed someone to make sure it went really well, Paula did that stuff, And in politics, just like in your workplaces, I would back a doer who gets stuff done every day of the week, and that's Paula.
Okay.
That would have been a long card, but,
Next question. We got a few hands up.
Can I ask two questions? The first one, the yak's name is Hope. Did you think about calling your social media career the audacity of hope?
It's a little bit liberal Democrat, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
And now that you're not in the leadership position, do you think Jacinda did a good job of handling COVID-19?
Yeah, I do. I think the reality, which is, let's again just be pretty frank about this, and the reality of why National is the underdog right now is because actually we've got a situation where we're all here in a pub. I can go up and shake your hand. We can have a good time. We can have a couple of beers. You can then go and basically do anything you like in New Zealand as normal, and most of the world can't. And you sit there and you, just as I do, see what's happening in Victoria, Australia, and the United States, where like gazillions of people have got it, and it's a terrible situation. So you can't but say, at a high level, if you like, it's gone really well. I think what is frustrating for me, and was as leader of the opposition, I did take, like, I knew, right? I mean, I don't want to sound like a smart ass, but I knew when we were doing stuff on that COVID committee, I knew when I was doing stuff in the media that people wouldn't thank me for it, but I felt like it was the right thing to do, to actually raise hard questions about some of the shitty stuff that was going on with PPE, some of the shitty things that were going wrong in our health sector, some of the stuff around quarantining that wasn't right. Now, in the end, is what it is. happier now than I was as leader of the opposition. So that's all good. But I'm simply saying it's been a good result. It hasn't been a perfect result. I think in truth we're going to see more problems because, by the way, everyone else has, and we sort of will too. And we've got hard decisions coming. We will just have to make a decision about how we open up. We're not going to be able to get away with just saying, nah, look, we'll just stay closed for 2 or 3 years. At some point, even those of you in this room who think that is, kind of an anathema and a terrible thing to say, you will also think that, I think. So, look, job well done. And now we've got to think about the future and who's the best team and who's got the best leadership to deal with that. And if ultimately your answer is, well, that's Jacinda her team, well, you'll vote for that. If it's not, well, you'll vote for an alternative.
Can I tell a story about the strong team? Was there a discussion about keeping that as a slogan?
Look, I can't diss my team too much. Let's move on to the next question.
Because I remember, like in 2017, the Green Party campaigned on a great together slogan, and then the caucus split and the co-leader left, and so it just seems to be a doomed thing to campaign on. That
let me have a go. I suppose I'll have a go because this is sort of live streaming somewhere or something. Yeah. I'm gonna have a go. I'll be having text from Judith or something. Yeah. I would say to you, yep, Jacinda, get it. And the other thing, let's just get out in this. What you perhaps even as people who follow politics really closely don't get is these people are sort of friends, right? Jacinda and I have been doing politics together. We came at the same time. We sledged each other on TVNZ for like our first 3 years. We know each other well. Whether it's Chris Hipkins or some of these other guys, we know each other well. And so we sort of get on. I think there is still a point, and you don't have to agree, but let me make the case that if you look at the overall teams and the competencies, it's hard to argue that even now we still have more ministerial experience. We just sort of do through the Judiths and the Jerrys and even myself, who's held a lot of portfolios over time and a bunch of others. We have more experience running big teams. If you went through the front bench and some of the things. And so I think we still can make the strong team, although the last month or two has been challenging.
Do we have another question? We got someone there.
Hi there. I view National as quite an interesting party because I've kind of recognised two flavours within it. You've got the Chris Bishops and the Nikki Kays, and then you've got the Judith Collins and the Jerry Brownlees. Yep. And who do you think, what kind of MP do you think is going to lead National into the future more effectively? Is it going to be the traditionals or the kind of the newer ones that tend to vote left on all the conscience votes?
Yeah. So I'm not just saying this to kind of be, look, one Bob one way and one Bob the other, right? It's just the reality of why the National Party actually today still is really strong. It's why, if you look at its track record, it's not by massive margins since the 80s, but by some margin is still the most successful political party and the biggest brand in politics, right? If you want to know why our numbers have held up so high, it's because, look, notwithstanding a rock star prime minister who gets on the cover in Time and so on, that national brand is a very strong brand, right? And to have a strong brand, you've got to have some things under it that mean that it's that brand has real cred. So my point is simply this: actually, a centre-right party does well when it marries those two things up. Yep. And if we don't do that well, and it's a risk for the future of the National Party, frankly, and we factionalise or we let one side get too strong, we've got a real worry. So you just go back any successful National Party team. Jim Bolger, the rural conservative. Don McKinnon was an urban liberal. John Key, urban liberal, but basically Bill English, clearly not, right? Simon Bridges, conservative. Paula Bennett, definitely not, right? So you go through... So we're at our best when we get them together because that ensures that those views, that broad church is represented around a cabinet table, and we kind of don't get silly. We don't go one way too far or the other. Now, if you want silly, you can vote for it. If you want, one way out this way, you absolutely, card-carrying liberal who has very clear views about 20 different things, you vote for it. But I'm simply saying to you...
Are you talking about the ACT party there?
Well,
okay.
number 3, the gun chick. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
You can do that, but I'm just saying to you, to get the vast sway of the votes, that marriage between Liberal and Conservative is really important, and we've got to make sure, actually, in National, we don't get away from that.
Okay. More questions. We got one at the back.
Yeah, g'day, Simon, over here, mate. Right at the back. Anyway, you can hear me.
The lights are very bright up here, so...
Yeah, I'm just curious from sort of a historical perspective. A couple of months ago, when stuff started to get real about COVID-19, was there a briefing, a moment where you kind of realised how serious it was? And I'm curious to know how it felt, like what was going on when stuff started getting really serious. Was it like world falling down around our ears kind of thing, or?
I'm about to give an answer that a real wanker would give, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's the truth. Look, I felt strongly from very early in February that this was going to be bigger than Texas, and and you can go back, and I kind of, I feel strongly also that we need a Royal Commission of Inquiry to go through this because it's just been such a massive event. We shut down a country for months, and it was the right thing to do. We've borrowed actually over $100 billion, and that's arguably the right thing to do as well. So we need a Royal Commission to go through these things. But I recall it was early February. Getting on the phone to Michael Woodhouse, who was at that time the health spokesperson, and look, I mean, I'm not sure whether he was into it or not, but I just said, man, it was a Saturday, I think. I said, man, you got to get up to Wellington, buddy. And he's in Dunedin, and I'm sure he would rather have stayed in Dunedin. You got to get up to Wellington. You got to have a press conference on Sunday. You got to get the media there. And we've got to drop the hammer on this thing, man. This is going to be big, and this is a really problem. And the government's kind of not taking it seriously enough. And by the way, I just have a sense of how it would have been handled under a key English government. We would have very quickly set up a cabinet committee. They would have been given to Power of Act, and they would have done stuff quicker, right? And so we sort of did that. I can remember the Audrey Young column. Sorry, Audrey, but. And she said these guys are dickheads. They've had this press conference. It was entirely unnecessary. It's over the top. What are they sort of doing? And my genuine view of life is that National, under me, was always about 2 weeks ahead of the public. On some things, we were probably a month ahead. Now, the problem with that is... if you're ahead of the public, you're by definition ahead of the public. And people don't want to hear these things sometimes. And on some things at the time, we went way too hard. And that's my cock-up. And life sort of goes on. It was bad political skills, if you want to put it that way, where I went too hard at times, where I should have just pulled back because the public wasn't there on those things yet. All I would say is if you went back and read the, Facebook post I did that had 27 people who said I was a piece of crap and this, that, and the other thing. My mother's read every one of them, which is not very good for her. But anyway, you went back and read that post today, you would say, man, that was moderate. That was so sort of, because by the way, within a month or two, it was all absolutely the conventional wisdom of where we're at, but it was just sort of too early. So I'm simply saying to you, I thought personally. It was really serious early on. I then thought, and again, this is the read the room, Simon, read the room. But I then thought more quickly that we were in a position where we were continuing, having got too slow to being really serious about it, we were staying too serious too long. And I personally believe we could have started opening up more quickly for reasons of livelihoods and jobs and the like.
To change tact completely.
Have we
Simon,
got Angela
I'm really,
again?
Yeah, it's me.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm really interested if there was a song lyric that best described you. I'd really like to know what it was, and I'd also really like to know what song lyric you would describe Judith with.
If you don't know me by now, you will never know me. No, I've got this thought in my head that I need to get out. Don't say it, Simon.
Can we have another beer for Simon Bridges, please?
No. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Right, let's keep moving.
Okay, I think we've got... Do we have time for one more? Let's take one more question, or maybe we should finish on that. No, we got one there.
After everything you've talked about your happiness tonight and you've just talked about your mum, would you still want to be Prime Minister of New Zealand?
You know the correct answer to that is no. Yeah. I wouldn't want to be opposition leader again. I can say it to you quite straight. It's a hard job. It's not much, good for kind of any aspect of your personal life, to be honest with you. Whether it's we won't get into that. So I certainly, and can I say a completely politically incorrect, totally wrong thing to say, but
why
it's just
stop
another
now?
one. Yeah,
Okay.
why not? Let's keep going. I just have this, again, kind of quirky view that the really real PMs are those that won from opposition, right? So if you think about the really, Bolger won from opposition, Helen Clark won from opposition, John Key won from opposition. And so, what I'm saying to you is actually, if you kind of, and Jacinda Ardern won from opposition. You said, in an 8-week campaign where you really didn't learn anything. But anyway, don't be like that, Simon. So I'm serious. Look, that ship sailed. But I sat there because you'd be a sort of there'd be something wrong if you didn't. When I lost the leadership, you got to kind of sit down and the best you can, because it's never going to be rational entirely, sit and say, well, is it time to sort of go? Because actually there's stuff you can do. I could go back to the law. I could do some stuff in the private sector. There's a bunch of things that, I could possibly do. And I suppose where I came down was that I can still make a strong contribution whilst not being leader. And, at 43, that may feel old to some of you, young to some of you, I don't know. But, I've still got time to sort of do that and to rehabilitate myself with yaks and song lyrics and all these other sort of things. So the long answer but short answer is no, but I still feel I've got a contribution to make, and that's why I'm sticking at it.
Simon Bridges, thank you very much. Can get a round of applause. Thank you.
Well done. Thanks for that.
Kia ora, I'm Alex Casey, Senior Writer at The Spin-Off. We wouldn't exist without the ongoing support of our generous members. If you're able to, you can make a donation at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spin-Off. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spin-Off member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spin-off Podcast Network.